Hello guys, on Voice of Betrayal, where every lie has a voice. They say you can't pick the moment your life changes forever. Sometimes it's a loud, dramatic event. Sometimes it's quiet, so quiet you don't even notice until years later, when you're looking back at the wreckage, wondering how you didn't see the cracks forming. For me, it started in a crowded coffee shop on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I had just gotten back from my morning workout, still wearing my old army hoodie, hair damp from the drizzle outside. I was in line, scrolling through emails on my phone, half aware of the world around me. And then, she walked in. She wasn't the kind of woman you slowly notice over time. No. She was the kind that hit you all at once, like someone turned the volume up on the whole room. She had this warmth in her smile, but something sharp in her eyes, like she was in on a joke the rest of us hadn't caught yet. We locked eyes for maybe 2 seconds, but it was enough to throw me off balance. I'd been through a lot before that day. Years in the army had carved me into something hard. My parents weren't exactly the warm hugs and heart-to-hearts type either. I'd learned to keep my emotions under lock and key. My buddies used to joke that my face had 2 settings, neutral and pissed. That was just me. Cold. Guarded. Untouchable. But that day, something shifted. When she stepped into line behind me, I could feel my pulse pick up, not in a "she's out of my league" way, but in a "this is going to mean something" way. And I was right. The first words out of her mouth were about my hoodie. "Army, huh?" she said, with this curious little smirk. "Yeah," I replied, glancing over. "You serving?" She shook her head. "No, but my dad did. Afghanistan." And just like that, we were talking, not small talk, but the kind of conversation where minutes turn into an hour without you noticing. I learned she loved photography, hated olives, and had a dog named Cooper who apparently thought he was a cat. She laughed at my dry jokes, and for someone who usually kept people at arm's length, I didn't want her to leave. By the time my coffee was cold, I knew I was done for. Over the next few weeks, we started seeing each other regularly. Dinner dates turned into late-night drives turned into weekends away. And somewhere along the line, my friends started noticing the change. "Dude, what's with you?" my buddy Mark asked one night at the bar. "What do you mean? You're smiling. Like, in public. It's weirding me out." I shrugged it off, but he wasn't wrong. I'd gone from a guy who didn't let anyone into a guy who would drop everything just to see her for an hour. She wasn't just my girlfriend, she was my safe place, my reason to breathe a little easier. 2 years later, I was standing under an arch of white roses, holding her hands, saying vows I thought I'd never say. We had a prenup, at her suggestion, which I thought was a little strange at the time, but love makes you think nothing bad could ever happen. Besides, we agreed on the terms: if either of us cheated, no alimony. Simple. Clean. Not that I thought we'd ever need it. The first year of marriage? Perfect. Trips to the coast. Lazy Sunday mornings making pancakes. A honeymoon phase that never seemed to end. Looking back now, I realize that was the peak. And like most peaks, the only way forward was down. Our first year as husband and wife felt like a movie, the kind with soft lighting, a perfect soundtrack, and no sign of a plot twist. We were living in a beautiful rental home in the suburbs, big enough for the family we planned to have someday, but small enough that it still felt cozy. Mornings started with me making coffee in the kitchen while she padded in, still in one of my t-shirts, hair messy, half asleep but smiling. She'd lean against the counter, steal my mug before I'd had a sip, and tell me about some dream she had that didn't make any sense. I was making great money at my job, enough for us to travel, eat out whenever we wanted, and not think twice about splurging. She didn't work, and I didn't care. I liked providing for us. I liked seeing her happy. We took weekend trips, tried every new restaurant in the city, and filled our house with little reminders of the places we'd been. One week we were kayaking off the coast of Maine. The next, we were sipping wine at a rooftop bar in Manhattan. And then there was Paris. Paris was her dream. She'd been talking about it since our second date, the way some people talk about their childhood home, like it was a place her soul belonged to. I surprised her with the tickets just after our 6-month wedding anniversary. She cried. And I don't mean a polite tear, I mean full on, hands over her face, can't even talk crying. Paris was magic. We stayed in a little boutique hotel with a balcony that overlooked the street. In the mornings, we'd walk to the cafe on the corner for croissants and espresso. At night, we'd wander the city with no destination in mind, letting the lights guide us. One night, we took a boat ride down the Seine. She stood at the railing, hair whipping in the wind, and looked back at me with this expression I'll never forget. It wasn't just happiness, it was that deep, settled joy you get when you know you're exactly where you're supposed to be. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my forever. That first year, we barely argued. Sure, there were little things, me forgetting to put the laundry in the dryer, her buying throw pillows we didn't need, but we laughed more than we fought. We went to bed holding hands. We made plans for the future. I thought we were building something unshakable. I thought we were untouchable. What I didn't know was that the cracks had already started forming, not because of anything she said or did, but because of the one thing I'd always been taught to value: hard work. And soon, my work would start pulling me away from her in ways I couldn't yet see. The second year didn't start with a fight. There wasn't some explosive moment where everything went wrong. It began quietly, like a slow leak you don't notice until the floor's already warped. It started with work. My company had been chasing a massive client for months. Landing them would mean a huge step forward for us, and for me personally. I'd been promised that if we pulled it off, I'd see a raise big enough to make all the late nights worth it. I told S about it early on. This might be a rough stretch, I said one night while we were eating takeout on the couch. I'm gonna be working longer hours for a while. She just smiled and reached for my hand. It's fine. I know how hard you work for us. I'll be okay. And at first, I believed her. For 6 months, my life became a loop. Wake up before sunrise. Hit the gym. Make breakfast for her before heading to the office. Work all day. Come home exhausted, but still push myself to make dinner, listen to her talk about her day, watch something together before bed. I was tired, bone-deep tired, but I didn't want her to feel like she'd been put on the back burner. I thought I was balancing everything just fine. What I didn't realize was that while I was fighting to bring in that big client, I was losing something else, time with her. Then, finally, it happened. We signed the contract. The relief was instant, a weight I'd been carrying for months just gone. I wanted to celebrate big, so I did what any husband who just survived 6 months of stress would do: I booked us a 2-month vacation. And not just anywhere, Paris. Again. Her favorite place. I'll never forget the way her eyes lit up when I told her. 2 whole months, she said, jaw-dropping. 2 months, I confirmed, grinning like an idiot. No work calls. No meetings. Just us. And for a while, it worked. Paris was just as beautiful as before. Maybe even more. We fell back into that easy rhythm we'd had in the first year. Long walks, late-night talks, wine in little sidewalk cafes. I thought, this is it. We're back. But the thing about cracks is, you can paint over them, polish the surface, make it look perfect. Underneath, they're still there. When we got home, I noticed the change. She was quieter. More distant. She'd spend hours on her phone, scrolling through God knows what, while I sat beside her on the couch. If I asked what she was looking at, she'd just say, nothing. Just stuff. I tried to talk to her about it. You've seemed off lately, I said one night while we were getting ready for bed. She sighed, not meeting my eyes. It's nothing. I'm just stressed. Personal stuff. And that was it. No details. No opening for me to step in and help. Just a wall I couldn't see over. For 6 months, it stayed like that. Me, trying to get her to open up. Her, retreating further away. At the time, I told myself it was just a phase, that marriage had its ups and downs, and we'd get through it. I had no idea I was already losing her. They say you can tell when someone's pulling away. It's in the little things, the tone of their voice, the way they don't look at you as long as they used to. The way they smile, but it doesn't reach their eyes anymore. I told myself I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew. It wasn't just that she was quieter. It was the way she seemed, distracted. We'd be watching a movie, and I'd glance over to find her staring at her phone instead of the screen. Her thumbs would fly across the keyboard, and the second she noticed me looking, the phone would flip face down on the couch. At first, I let it go. Everyone needs their space. But it kept happening, at dinner, in the car, even in bed. "Who's that?" I asked once, nodding toward the phone lighting up beside her. She didn't even glance at it. "Nobody. Just a friend." "Which friend?" She frowned. "Why are you suddenly so interested in my phone?" And just like that, I was the bad guy for asking. She started going out more. Shopping, she'd say, or grabbing coffee with a friend. Sometimes she'd come home smelling like perfume, not hers. Other times she'd be in a different outfit than the one she'd left in, claiming she'd spilled something. When I tried to bring it up, she had a way of flipping the script. "You're being paranoid," she'd say, shaking her head. "I'm just trying to understand what's going on," I'd reply. "What's going on," she'd snap, "is that you've been distant for months because of work, and now you want to blame me for it." That one hit me hard, because there was some truth to it. I had been distant when I was chasing that client. And guilt is a powerful thing, it makes you doubt your own instincts. By then, the house didn't feel like home anymore. The laughter we used to share over dinner was gone, replaced with short, clipped conversations. I'd come home from work and find her in another room with the door closed. Sometimes she wouldn't even look up when I walked in. One night, lying in bed beside her, I realized I didn't recognize the woman next to me. She was there physically, but it felt like she'd already left. Still, I kept telling myself it was a phase. That if I was patient, if I kept showing up, we could find our way back. I had no idea how wrong I was. And I had no idea that the truth was going to hit me like a freight train, on a day that should have been one of the happiest of my life. It was supposed to be one of the best days of my career. We were in a big conference room at work, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. The CEO had gathered everyone to announce promotions and raises. I already knew I had a strong shot at something good. The deal I'd landed with that massive client had been a game-changer for the company. When my name came up, the CEO smiled. "A 30% raise," he said, his voice echoing across the room. "Well earned." Everyone clapped. I shook hands, thanked the boss, and sat down, already planning how I'd tell S. The thought of her face lighting up, that same look she had when I surprised her with Paris, was the only thing on my mind. I decided I wouldn't just tell her over the phone. No, this deserved a celebration. I'd take a couple of days off, maybe book a quick getaway for just the two of us. We'd toast to the future. On the drive home, I was buzzing. The sun was out, music was up, and for the first time in months, I felt light. I pulled into the driveway earlier than usual. Her car was there. Perfect, I thought. She's home. I can tell her in person. But as I stepped out of my car, I froze. There were sounds coming from inside the house, muffled at first, but unmistakable once I got closer. Voices. Breathless. Urgent. Then, a sound that ripped the floor out from under me. Her voice. For a second, my brain refused to believe it. I stood there, hand on the doorknob, heart pounding so hard it hurt. My first instinct wasn't even anger, it was denial. No. No way. I must be hearing wrong. But the voices didn't stop. And every second I stood there, the truth clawed its way further into me. I pulled my phone out. My hands were shaking as I hit record, not because I thought I'd need proof for court, but because I needed proof for myself. Proof that this wasn't some stress-fueled nightmare I'd wake up from. Then I opened the door. The scene is burned into my memory like it was seared there with a branding iron. She was on the couch. He was, well, scrambling to get dressed, half naked, clutching his clothes to his chest as he bolted past me. I didn't even look at him. My eyes were locked on her. She froze, a pillow clutched against her chest, eyes wide. For a split second, there was genuine shock, like she couldn't believe I was standing there. Then it shifted into something uglier. "You're home early," she said, her voice tight. I didn't answer. I just kept recording. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then, unbelievably, she went on the attack. "This isn't what it looks like," she blurted, her voice rising. "You've been distant for months. I thought you were cheating on me." I stood there, my mind reeling. The sheer absurdity of her words almost made me laugh, but there was nothing funny about this moment. I didn't yell. Didn't throw anything. Didn't demand explanations. I just turned and walked to the bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started packing. She followed me, still talking, her voice frantic now. "You can't just leave. We can fix this. It was a mistake." But I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was holding myself together by the thinnest thread, and if I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out. 30 minutes later, I was in my car, pulling away from the house we'd called home. And as strange as it sounds, the moment I turned the corner, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. I didn't go to a friend's place that night. I didn't go to my sister's. I just drove until the streetlights blurred together and the weight in my chest got too heavy to carry. Eventually, I found myself in front of a hotel, nothing fancy, just a place with a lobby that smelled like old carpet cleaner and coffee that had been sitting for hours. I booked a room for 3 nights. The front desk clerk didn't even look up when I slid my ID across the counter. When I closed the door behind me, the silence hit. I set my suitcase down, sat on the edge of the bed, and just stared at the wall. My mind kept replaying the scene in the living room, over and over, like my brain was trying to understand it from every possible angle. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. First, it was calls. Then texts. Then voicemails. "Please, answer me. We need to talk. I'm sorry. I love you. Please come home." I didn't respond. I didn't even read half of them. The sight of her name lighting up my phone made my stomach turn. By the second night, she started getting angry. "You're overreacting. This doesn't have to be the end. If you loved me, you'd talk to me." If I loved her. That was the thing, I had loved her. More than anyone. And she'd taken that love, that trust, and used it like it was disposable. After 3 nights in the hotel, I knew what I had to do. I called a lawyer, an old friend of my best friend, who'd been through a nasty divorce himself. I laid it all out, the prenup, the trust I'd set up years ago, the recording, everything. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Man," he said, "I don't know if you realize this, but you've set yourself up better than most guys in your situation. She's not walking away with much." It was the first bit of good news I'd had in days. For the next few weeks, I went no contact. Changed my number. Moved some of my things into storage. Went to work, came home to the hotel, repeated. I didn't tell many people what had happened, not because I was protecting her, but because I didn't want to hear the pity in their voices. But the silence between us was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. And I knew it wouldn't last forever. When the day came to finally face her, she'd walk into that meeting with her lawyer like she was about to win. She had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of the table. The meeting was set for a Tuesday morning in a quiet downtown office. Neutral ground. Glass walls, muted carpet, a conference table that looked like it had been polished an hour before we arrived. I got there early. My lawyer, Tom, was already waiting inside, flipping through a folder. He looked up, gave me a calm nod. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," I said. We didn't have to wait long. The door opened, and there she was, dressed in a crisp blazer, makeup flawless, hair styled like she was going to a magazine shoot instead of a divorce meeting. She had that same confident smile I'd seen so many times before, except now, it wasn't for me. Her lawyer trailed behind her, looking smug in that I've seen this before kind of way. She sat down across from me, smoothing her skirt, and the first words out of her mouth weren't "hello" or "how are you." They were. "I did the right thing cheating on you. You'll see. I'm walking out of this with half your money, and I won't have to work a day in my life." I didn't even look at her. I looked at Tom, and he looked back at me with the kind of grin you only see on someone who knows the other side is about to get blindsided. He reached into his folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, and slid it across the table to her lawyer. "The prenup," he said. I watched the smile slip from her face. She recognized it immediately, the document she'd been so eager to sign before the wedding. The one that stated, in plain, undeniable language, that whoever cheated forfeited any right to alimony. Her lawyer's expression changed in real time, from smug, to confused, to oh no. "You'll still get half of what's in the marital accounts," Tom said evenly, "but no alimony, no ongoing support, nothing else. That's what you agreed to." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and her voice cracked. "Wait, no. That's not, you can't just." "Yes," Tom interrupted, his voice calm but final. "We can. And we will." Her bravado collapsed in seconds. The confident woman who had walked in was gone, replaced by someone desperate, scrambling for a lifeline. "Please," she said, turning back to me. "It was just a mistake. I still love you. We can work this out. We can start over." For 20 straight minutes, she tried every angle, tears, apologies, even nostalgia. She brought up Paris, our wedding, the early days when everything felt perfect. But all I could think about was the sound of her voice that day in our house, the sound that told me exactly who she'd become. Finally, she signed the papers. Her hand was shaking. When it was done, she stared at the table, her voice barely a whisper. "That's not enough to even pay 6 months of rent." I stood, buttoned my jacket, and didn't say a word. As I walked out, I could hear her behind me, pleading, crying, saying she loved me, saying she made a mistake. But the thing about mistakes is, some can't be undone. The strange thing about endings is how quiet they are. You expect thunder, fireworks, something big to mark the moment your life changes. But when I stepped out of that glass conference room for the last time, there was none of that. Just the click of the door behind me and the sound of my own footsteps in the hallway. I thought I'd feel rage. Or grief. Or even relief like the night I first left. Instead, I just felt done. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, logistics, and moving forward. I moved my things out of storage and into a new apartment downtown, smaller than the house we'd shared, but mine. Every inch of it mine. Her name didn't cross my lips. I didn't ask about her, didn't respond when mutual friends brought her up. But word still found its way to me. She'd kept the house for a few months, burning through the money she'd gotten in the split. Then, when the rent and bills caught up, she'd had to move into a small one-bedroom near her new job. I heard she was working part-time, the kind of job that barely kept her afloat. Once or twice, she tried to call. From a blocked number. I didn't answer. Meanwhile, I started seeing someone new. We met through friends, nothing forced, no grand romantic gesture, just two people sharing a laugh over drinks. She was different. She asked about my day and actually listened. She didn't care how much I made or what trips I could take her on. She cared about me. At first, I was cautious. After what I'd been through, trust wasn't something I could hand out freely. But slowly, I started to let my guard down again. One night, a few months into dating, she and I were out walking, and she asked about my past. Not the details, just the broad strokes. I told her I'd been married once. That it ended badly. That it taught me two things. First, to protect what's mine. And second, that love without trust isn't love at all, it's just a temporary arrangement waiting to collapse. She didn't press for more. She just took my hand and kept walking. Life didn't go back to the way it was before. It couldn't. But it went forward. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Some mistakes, you walk away from with scars. Others, you walk away from with wisdom. I walked away with both. It's strange, looking back now, how certain moments become turning points. When I caught that day, when she looked up from that couch with panic in her eyes, that was the death of something I thought would last forever. But here's the truth I've learned. Not every ending is a tragedy. Some endings are the start of a better chapter you didn't know you were allowed to write. A year after the divorce, I ran into an old friend from before I met S. He said something that stuck with me. "You know," he said, "before her, you were different. Sharper. Colder. Then you softened up, she did that. But now. Now you're both. You're strong, but you've got heart. You wouldn't have that without what happened. I didn't know whether to thank him or argue, so I just smiled. Maybe he was right. I never hated S, in the end. Don't get me wrong, I don't forgive her, and I don't excuse her. What she did was a betrayal that cut deep. But hating her would mean I'm still carrying her with me. And I'm not. The last time she tried to contact me, I didn't even feel anger. I just looked at her name on the screen, thought about the man I was when I met her, and the man I am now, and I set the phone down without answering. Because my story moved on. These days, my life is simple. I have my work. I have someone new who doesn't make love feel like walking on glass. And most importantly, I have my peace. I used to think that happily ever after was about finding the right person. Turns out, it's about becoming the right person for yourself. And that's exactly where I am. That's the story of how my marriage ended, and how my life began again. Not with fireworks. Not with revenge. But with a quiet decision to choose myself. Because sometimes, the best closure is just moving on.